Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the channel. And today I'm going to go my review of WCW's World War III 1996. Starting off the evening, we'll go to our first match of the night. It is for the J Crown Championship. It is Rey Mysterio Jr. versus Ultimo Dragon. I thought this was a great match. Back and forth matchup between Mysterio and the Dragon, with the Dragon landing a kick combination on Mysterio. Dragon then hits a springboard dropkick, sending Rey to the outside. Dragon was keeping the pace of the match, with Dragon hitting a tombstone piledriver on Mysterio for a near fall. Dragon then hits a Frankensteiner off the top rope on Mysterio. Mysterio then finally gets up, hits a springboard moonsault on the Dragon. Mysterio then hits a springboard senton to the outside on the Dragon as well, but the Dragon ultimately hits a slingshot-type powerbomb on Mysterio, pins him for the 3, and your winner of the match, and at that time still J Crown champion, is the Ultimo Dragon. Hats off to the Ultimo Dragon for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Nick Patrick versus Chris Jericho in a one-arm tied behind your back match. Pretty much it was Jericho having one arm tied behind his back. I thought it was an okay matchup. Back and forth matchup between Nick Patrick and Chris Jericho, with Jericho keeping the pace of the match. Jericho ultimately hits a super kick on Nick Patrick, pins him for the 3, and your winner of the match is Chris Jericho. Hats off to Chris Jericho for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Jeff Jarrett versus the Giant. I thought this was an okay matchup. Back and forth matchup between Jarrett and the Giant, with the Giant keeping the pace of the match. Giant ends up hitting a leg drop on Jarrett in the middle of the ring. Sting is shown walking around the top of the arena. Sting then makes his way down to the ring. Sting then hits a Scorpion Death Drop on Jeff Jarrett. Giant then capitalizes on that, hits a choke slam on Jeff Jarrett, pins him for the 3, and your winner of the match is the Giant. Hats off to the Giant for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is the Amazing French Canadians versus Harlem Heat. I thought this was an okay matchup. Back and forth matchup between both teams, with Harlem Heat keeping the pace of the match. Booker T ultimately hits his signature Harlem Hangover in this match, pins for the 3, and your winners of the match are Harlem Heat. Hats off to Harlem Heat for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is for the WCW Cruiserweight Championship. It is Dean Malenko versus Psychosis. I thought this was a great match. Back and forth matchup between Malenko and Psychosis, with Malenko keeping the pace of the match. Malenko quickly applies a Texas Cloverleaf on Psychosis, but Psychosis breaks the hold. Malenko then hits a Tombstone Piledriver on Psychosis, and then Malenko ultimately hits a roll-up, pins for the 3, and your winner of the match, and at that time still WCW Cruiserweight Champion, is Dean Malenko. Hats off to Dean Malenko for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is for the WCW Tag Team Championships. It is the Outsiders versus the Faces of Fear versus the Nasty Boys. I thought this was a good match. Back and forth matchup with all teams involved, with Hall and Nash keeping the pace of the match. Nash ultimately hits his signature powerbomb on Brian Knobbs, pins him for the 3, and your winners of the match, and still at that time WCW Tag Team Champions, are the Outsiders. Hats off to the Outsiders for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is the main event of WCW's World War III 1996. It is the World War III Battle Royal. I thought this was a good match. Back and forth matchup with everybody involved, with Lex Luger and the Giant being the last 2 competitors in the ring. Giant ultimately eliminates Lex Luger and wins the Battle Royal. A couple of things I'm going to say about WCW's World War III 1996 before I get out of here, man. Number one, well, honestly, a couple things. Number one, the opening matchup. Mysterio versus Ultimo Dragon. I thought it was a solid match, man, to be honest with you. And for the J Crown Championship. Now, a lot of people might not be familiar with the J Crown Championship. Allow me to explain. For what I understand, the J Crown Championship is more or less New Japan's version of the, IWGP Light Heavyweight Championship. There was a tournament that was held, I believe the inaugural tournament happened in 1996. I think the first winner of that championship was the Great Suzuki. When Dragon came out to this match against Mysterio at the time, Dragon came out wearing multiple championships. I mean, from all the way over in Japan, all the way into Mexico, and he's severely underrated, in my honest opinion. But the J Crown Championship was a big, big deal back in 96, 97 for Japan. And it was a great match, man. Mysterio Jr. and the Dragon put on a phenomenal match. And again, it just reiterates what I've been saying about, the Cruiserweight division. It's severely underrated, man. With the names that came over, to the Cruiserweight division, just not only from Japan, but from Mexico, like Juventud Guerrero, Eddie Guerrero, Conan, all over the world, man, and just put on phenomenal matches. Psychosis put on phenomenal matches for the Cruiserweight division for WCW, man. And to be honest with you, and I've stated this multiple times in the past, the Cruiserweight division for WCW was severely underrated, hands down. Multi-time Hall of Famers walked through that door as a Cruiserweight in WCW, hands down. Couple matches on here I could have done without. Number one, Nick Patrick versus Chris Jericho, with Jericho having his one arm tied behind his back. I'm not really too big on gimmick matches, man. And to be honest with you, WCW has had probably the most awful gimmick matches of all professional wrestling of all time. And this was one of them, man. I didn't understand the reason behind it. I mean, I understand what they were trying to do at this time. Nick Patrick was, the referee, obviously was having some ties to the NWO, and so on and so forth, and wanted to have a match. It just was very lackadaisical booking, in my honest opinion. Jeff Jarrett and the Giant, again, you guys know by now how I feel about Jeff Jarrett. And I stated it multiple times in the past, I think his best in-ring wrestling matches that he had was in Impact Wrestling. To be honest with you, I don't think his WCW run was that great. I think the reason why he was World Heavyweight Champion for WCW back in the day was because this was a time that WCW was going downhill. Not just financially, but talent were starting to leave. They were starting to go back, or go over to WWE. And there was really nobody left at that time in WCW that was a really big household name than Jeff Jarrett. So, again, take it with a grain of salt, man. But, it was Jeff Jarrett versus the Giant. You're not really going to get a whole lot out of a Jeff Jarrett match, in my honest opinion. The other match I could have done without, and it's not taking anything away from Harlem Heat, but it was a Harlem Heat match versus the Amazing French Canadians. Maybe because I don't know much about that tag team as far as the Amazing French Canadians, I just felt like Harlem Heat was pretty much carrying the match, in my honest opinion. Dean Malenko versus Psychosis, solid match again for the Cruiserweight Championship. The Cruiserweight division is severely underrated for WCW. The Outsiders versus the Face of Fear versus the Nasty Boys for the WCW Tag Team Championship. Solid matchup. And then obviously the World War III Battle Royal. It was a really good match. What I will say, I also will say this, man. The World War III pay-per-view for WCW, I wasn't really a big fan of it. I think it was kind of a knockoff to the Royal Rumble, if I'm not being mistaken. I mean, basically it was they were trying to do it different, but it was almost like the same concept. At least that's how it felt for me. I mean, they made it different by adding three rings into a single arena and made it into a Battle Royal format. So it wasn't exactly like the Rumble in the aspect that there was one ring and, everybody came out individually to the ring to have the match. Where the World War III Battle Royal, 60 superstars came out to the ring all at once and battled it out until the winner, the last man standing in the match. It was kind of the same thing with the Rumble where, whoever got eliminated last, that was the last guy in the ring. He was the winner of the match. So it was kind of the same deal as the Rumble. I felt like Eric Bischoff at that time, and the staff for WCW really liked the idea of the Royal Rumble. And that's to me, that's the reason why the World War III pay-per-view was adapted or adopted into the WCW format as far as pay-per-views are concerned. But I will say it was one of the pay-per-views on their list of pay-per-views every year that I could have done without. And WCW had some really good pay-per-views, man, to be honest with you. I mean, the Great American Bash, Halloween Havoc, Starrcade, Slamboree. Pay-per-views that really, were on the map for WCW for a long time, especially Starrcade. I mean, Starrcade's been around, before Ted Turner even took over. I mean, Starrcade was around during the Crockett era. Starrcade 83, Starrcade 84, that was well before Ted Turner and Eric Bischoff really came into play for WCW at that time. So, they had great pay-per-views. Some of the pay-per-views, though, I could have done without. Spring Stampede, stuff like that, I could have done without. But if I had to give WCW's World War III 1996 a solid rating from a 1 out of a 10, I'm going to have to give WCW's World War III 1996 a solid rating of a 5, 5.5 at best. But this is my review of WCW's World War III 1996. I hope you guys are out there staying safe. Be careful, and remember, stay classic. Peace.